Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host Gershwin and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Space Marines as we get into the Nemesis Incident, a situation where a Space Marine chapter fought a group of warp entities that are not demon, so it's a little different than usual. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day, and if you have any suggestions for other topics, comment down below because we read the comments every single day. And if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. Link in the description if you want to support. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Nemesis Incident. Every chapter of the Space Marines has its own legends, many recounting glorious victories and noble deeds, others serving as warnings against hubris or the disloyalty of traitors and aliens. The loyal Space Marines of the Storm Warden's chapter hold many of these battle honors, yet the defining campaign in their history is shrouded in mystery, its true details unknown even to those brethren now interned within the sarcophagi of mighty dreadnoughts, some of whom might actually have been serving the chapter at that time. The only details of the event that would later become known as the Nemesis Incident are to be found within the pages of the Libra Tempest, a 77-volume tome describing the deeds of the chapter and the lives of its heroes throughout the turbulent years of the Age of Apostasy in the late 36 millennia. The book details the calamitous events of the Age of Apostasy as experienced by the Storm Warden's chapter. The Nemesis Incident represents a brief but dramatic period within this turbulent time, and the book presents very few details of it. The roots of the incident are to be found in the general increase in warp storm activities that afflicted the Imperium in the run-up to and during the Age of Apostasy. Trade routes, the length and breadth of the galaxy, became all but impassable as the warp boiled with turbulent etheric storm fronts. Entire war fleets and crusading armies were lost as the warp routes they traveled were overcome with impossible energies. In many areas, the raw stuff of the immaterium bled through the thin veil of reality and engulfed the settled worlds of entire systems. The more fortunate were simply cut off from all outside contact. The less fortunate were saturated in the terrible unreality of the warp. Entire populations spontaneously mutating or falling victim to apocalyptic demonic incursions. Aside from etheric overbleeding, genetic mutation, and demonic incursion, warp storms sometimes bring with them the risk of another, thankfully rare, but utterly devastating threat. There exists in the depths of the warp entities other than what men call demons. Enslavers are one such form, a nightmarish hybrid of the xeno and the demonic that exists for most of its life within the immaterium, but breeds and multiplies in real space. Enslavers utilize the minds of untrained or latent psychers, transforming their victims' bodies into vast, distended gateways through which the enslavers themselves pour from the warp. Then they are able to take control of the bodies of their foes, turning them into drooling mind slaves that fight until overcome by their wounds, exposure, or malnutrition. When warp storm activities increased, so too do the rates of the psychers' births, and so the Age of Apostasy was underpinned by a second horror, that of an enslaver plague. The many versions of the book all agree upon this fact, but the accounts begin to diverge at the point when the chapter was committed to a region of space known as the Scorpius Cluster. For the Space Marines, the Age of Apostasy was an extended period of retrenchment during which the pronouncements of the Senatorium Imperialis were replaced with the irrational dictates of the High Lord Goj Van Dyer. The vast majority of Astartes chapter masters became so distrustful of Van Dyer's orders that they were forced to pursue their duties without recourse to the central authority once provided by the Council of the High Lords of Terra. Where warp conditions allowed, chapters coordinated their actions with brother chapters, or occasionally with the forces of the Inquisition. Yet very few answered to the commands or demands of the High Lord Van Dyer. Most versions of the Libra Tempest agree that the Storm Warden's chapter master, Owen Glenworm, took their force to the Scorpius Cluster in response to a reading of the Emperor's Tarot made by its chief librarian, but some texts call this into question, insinuating that the deployment may have been carried out on the behest of the Inquisition or some other faction within the Imperium's shattered structure. Having reached the cluster, it is said that the Storm Wardens discovered a swath of worlds entirely consumed by the rolling energies of the warp. Those worlds, lying on the outskirts of the storm, had come under the dominion of the largest enslaver plague the Segmentum had ever witnessed. The chapter master Glenworm was faced with a terrible choice: deploy his warriors into a battle that would undoubtedly prove costly in the lives of his warriors, or grant the doomed and enslaved population the Emperor's mercy and scour the world's surface with the nuclear fire of exterminatus. Once more, the various accounts of the war differ in their descriptions of what followed. One book contains a detailed account of the chapter master and an unnamed Inquisitor Lord exploring a series of ruins across several of the cluster's worlds, and this is corroborated by the Libra Tempest itself. No account of the ruins give any suggestion as to which alien species may have built them, but all describe their hulls are black and oppressive, and completely dwarfing even the mightiest Space Marines. At some point during the exploration of these ruins, it appears that the Storm Wardens and an allied Inquisitor force came under attack, first by a horde of Enslaver human meat puppets, and then by the Enslaver behemoths. The Chapter Master and the First Company fought a series of desperate battles against the Enslavers, during which many heroic battle brothers were lost. 3 entire worlds were cleansed of the Xenos' presence, but ultimately the Inquisitor declared the right of exterminatus on 7 more, before the cluster was declared purged of the Enslaver plague. In the aftermath of the campaign, the Storm Wardens returned to their homeworld of Sacris, yet by many accounts, it appears that the taint had not been entirely eradicated, and the First Company had in fact brought it back to the Calixis sector. According to one account found in the Book of Enion, a number of First Company veterans had become corrupted by some form of psychic taint, which was only uncovered during post-battle cleansing protocols. The chapter's most senior apothecaries, chaplains, and librarians turned their efforts to purging this corruption, but according to the Enion's account, the taint was so ingrained it presented a dire threat to the survival of the entire chapter. Initially, the Inquisitor Lord was of the view that those infected should be submitted to voluntary liquidation, yet the Storm Warden senior officers argued against such a drastic sanction. The Chapter Master ultimately proposed a compromise. Having convinced the Inquisitor Lord of the viability of his plan, the Chapter Master ordered that he and the entire First Company be interned within stasis sarcophagi in the vaults far below the Chapter's fortress monastery, which would not be open until such time as a defined cure for the Enslaver corruption be discovered. The Inquisition placed a condition on their acquiescence, demanding that the Chapter's homeworld be isolated from the Greater Imperium, and all knowledge of the Nemesis Incident be purged from the history of the Imperium. Aside from those contradictory accounts present in these books, which are accessible only to the most senior officers of the Chapter, none outside the Storm Wardens have any inklings of the tragic events of the Stropius cluster campaign. There were many side effects to the sealing of the stasis vaults and the isolation of Sacris. Firstly, many of the Chapter's oldest archives were sealed along with the First Company, so that millennia later, the Storm Wardens remain ignorant as to the many details of their founding and earliest history. Furthermore, a number of legends have evolved around the incident, which form the basis of some of the Chapter's most cherished rituals. One such legend states that the long-lost brethren of the First Company will someday return, when the very existence of the Chapter, and indeed the Imperium, is threatened. The Chapter's beliefs call upon its members to be ever vigilant of such a time, and to meet with honor and stoicism every challenge the galaxy can throw at them. The Storm Wardens maintain their traditions to this day, seeking every chance to prove themselves in the eye of those who they believe will one day return, and judge them worthy of standing at their sides in the final battle against the many foes of mankind. And those were 40 facts on the Nemesis Incident. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment down below, let me know what you wish can happen once the vaults get open. Do you want to see a bunch of broken sarcophagi, and then there's just a bunch of chaotic Space Marines attacking the Storm Wardens? Or do you want there to be a giant behemoth enslaver trying to attack the Chapter? Or maybe it is just going to be an example of how the Space Marines are just so stoic and eternal, and they're still in their sarcophagi, and then they get saved. Probably not that, but it would show how the Space Marines kind of live forever. What's interesting about this whole lore is it kind of showcases the longevity of a Space Marine. We get that question a lot in the Greater War episodes. You guys want to know how long a Space Marine lives? This example, they're in a stasis sarcophagi, so they're kind of like frozen in time. But in reality, they could just be like, let's say the sarcophagi somehow malfunctioned. They could survive inside that vault for a really long time. Dante, I believe, is probably the longest living Space Marine, and he's lived for millennia. I think longer than the 36 millennia, definitely. It might have been back like right before the Horus Heresy. I need to refresh my Dante lore. But also you can, we have the Space Wolves Dreadnought, who's on Fenris, who's also lived since the Emperor walked amongst man. So Space Marines live a very long time. And the fact that they're throwing in this like enslaver plague, or this enslaver creature into the lore. If you want to learn more about the enslaver, check out our 40 facts on the enslavers. They are a creature that's not just like a stereotypical bad guy. They actually go as far back as the Necron time. So what is it, 60 billion years or 60 million years? So during the War in Heaven, the enslavers actually are the reason why the old ones had to leave. So it is like an ancient evil. They're not just like, you know, creatures of the warp. They truly are like a devastating threat. So it's cool that GW has introduced these guys. If you have any other ideas for any topics of Warhammer 40K that you guys would like us to cover, comment down below. If you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. If you want to support us, link in the description. It's $1 a month and it helps us create more videos for you guys. We really want to buy the mics for the Greater Wa episodes, just so that the sound is a little better, and improve this mic here. So helping us over on Patreon does that for you guys. You guys will just get videos that sound a lot better. Yeah, if you can't support us, it's cool. Just like, comment, and tell your friends about us, and that's helping out a lot. But with that said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any